I still remember the sting of that mountain wind whipping against my face as my son, my only child, the one I'd poured my life into, turned his back on me mid-hike, his voice cold and final. "You're on your own, Dad." There I was abandoned like discarded gear on a treacherous trail. My legs trembled, heart pounding with betrayal's raw ache. But as I clawed my way back down alone, a quiet resolve ignited. Justice wouldn't be loud or vengeful. It would be precise, methodical, stripping away his illusions just as he'd stripped mine. And oh, how terrifying those consequences would prove. Before we continue, please subscribe to stay updated on our latest stories, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. "Come on, Dad, we used to love these trails," Jason called over his shoulder, his voice carrying genuine enthusiasm. He'd suggested this hike after our latest argument about money, his way of making peace, I hoped. The Pine Ridge Trail climbed steep and unforgiving, each step sending jolts through my aging knees. Jason moved with the easy stride of 32, while I felt every one of my 62 years. My breath came harder as we gained elevation, but I pushed forward, grateful for this chance to reconnect. "You doing okay back there?" he asked, pausing to wait for me. "Just taking it slow," I replied, wiping sweat from my forehead. The morning sun was already intense, and we hadn't even reached the summit trail yet. Jason checked his phone and frowned. "No signal up here." He looked around at the dense forest, then back at me, struggling up the incline. "Maybe we should have picked an easier trail." "I'm fine, son. This is good for both of us." We climbed in companionable silence for another 20 minutes. I was actually starting to believe this might work, that we could find our way back to being father and son instead of creditor and debtor. Then my foot caught the loose rock hidden beneath fallen leaves. I felt my ankle twist sickeningly, heard something pop. Pain exploded up my leg as I crashed hard onto the rocky trail, my hiking pole clattering away down the slope. "Dad!" Jason spun around, his face shocked. "Are you hurt?" "My ankle," I gasped, trying to shift position. The pain was immediate and intense, radiating up my calf. "I think I twisted it pretty bad." Jason knelt beside me, but when I tried to put weight on the injured foot, I nearly blacked out from the pain. "I can't walk on it," I admitted, my voice tight. "Not right now." For a moment, we both stared at each other, the reality sinking in. We were miles from the parking lot, the trail was steep and rocky, and I couldn't stand without assistance. Jason stood up slowly, looking down the trail we'd climbed, then back at me, sitting helplessly on the ground. Something shifted in his expression, not quite cold, but distant. "Well," he said after a long pause, "I guess we have a problem." "Can you help me up?" I asked, extending my hand toward him. "Maybe I can lean on you. Take it slow." Jason stared at my outstretched hand for a long moment, then looked away toward the trail ahead. "Dad, you can barely stand. How are we supposed to make it 3 miles like this?" "We'll figure it out. That's what family does." Something flickered across his face at the word family. He kicked at a loose stone, sending it skittering down the mountainside. "Family," he repeated, his voice flat. "Right. Like how you were family when you made me feel like garbage for asking for help with the mortgage?" The pain in my ankle pulsed, but suddenly it felt insignificant compared to the ache in my chest. "Jason, I never said you were garbage. I just said, you said I needed to learn responsibility, that I couldn't keep running to Daddy every time things got tough." He was pacing now, his hiking boots scuffing against the rocky trail. "Well, guess what? Now you get to learn what that feels like." I tried to push myself up using a nearby tree for support, but my ankle buckled immediately. The pain sent white-hot stars across my vision. "Son, please, I need your help." Jason stopped pacing and looked down at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, something colder. "You know, I've been thinking about this whole money thing," he said, adjusting his backpack straps. "About how you always act like you're doing me some huge favor, like I should be grateful for every penny. That's not. Let me finish." His voice cut through my protest like a blade. "Maybe it's time you understood what it feels like to really need someone and have them just not be there for you." The mountain wind picked up, whistling through the pine trees around us. I felt something shift in the air between us, something fundamental breaking apart. "Jason, what are you saying?" He looked down the trail, then back at me, sitting helpless on the ground. His next words came out measured, deliberate. I'm saying maybe you need to figure this one out on your own, Dad. My heart started pounding, but not from the altitude. You can't be serious. Oh, I'm dead serious. He shouldered his pack more firmly. You wanted me to learn independence? Well, now it's your turn. The realization hit me like a physical blow. My own son, the boy I'd carried on my shoulders up these very mountains when he was small, was actually considering leaving me here. Jason, I'm your father. He turned to face me fully, and for a moment I saw a flash of something. Guilt? Regret? But then his jaw set in that stubborn line I remembered from his teenage years. And you're on your own, Dad. The silence after Jason's footsteps faded was absolute. Not even the wind dared whisper through the pines as I sat there, stunned, watching the empty trail where my son had disappeared. My ankle throbbed with each heartbeat, but that pain felt distant compared to the hollow ache spreading through my chest. You're on your own, Dad. I tested my weight against the tree trunk, wincing as fire shot up my leg. 3 miles. That's what lay between me and the parking lot. 3 miles of rocky, unforgiving terrain with an ankle that screamed protest at the slightest pressure. But I had to move. The afternoon sun was already shifting, and these mountains didn't forgive the unprepared or the slow. Each step was agony. I fashioned a makeshift crutch from a fallen branch, gripping it so tightly my knuckles went white. Step, pause, breathe. Step, pause, breathe. The rhythm became a meditation, a way to keep the crushing weight of betrayal from pulling me under. How did we get here? The question echoed with each labored step. I thought about the boy who used to beg me to take him hiking, who would scramble up these same trails with boundless energy, stopping to show me every interesting rock or unusual leaf. When had that curious, loving child transformed into the man who could walk away from his injured father? The trail curved around a massive boulder, and I had to stop, gasping. My shirt was soaked with sweat despite the mountain chill. I leaned against the cold stone, remembering the last time Jason and I had been here together. He was 14, sullen about being dragged away from his video games. But by the end of that day, he'd been laughing, promising we'd do it again soon. Promises. The word tasted bitter now. I pushed off from the boulder and kept moving. The pain was becoming a strange companion, each pulse of my ankle keeping time with darker thoughts I'd never allowed myself to think before. About the mortgage payments that never came with gratitude, only demands for more. About the birthday calls that lasted exactly long enough to ask about money. About the way his wife Megan looked right through me at family dinners I paid for. When did I become just a bank account to him? A rest stop appeared ahead, weathered picnic tables and a small shelter where day hikers often paused. I dragged myself to the nearest bench and collapsed, my makeshift crutch clattering to the ground. The relief of sitting was immediate, but it brought with it a clarity I wasn't prepared for. Jason hadn't just abandoned me on this mountain. He'd been abandoning me piece by piece for years, taking what he needed and giving back only enough to keep the well from running dry. Today was just the moment the mask finally slipped completely. I pulled out my phone, still no signal, but the battery was at 60%. Good. When I got down from here, I'd need it. Because something fundamental had changed in those terrible moments when my son chose to walk away. The father who had climbed up this mountain was gone, left behind like everything else I'd foolishly believed about unconditional love and family loyalty. The man who would make it down would be different, harder, wiser, and Jason had no idea what he'd just unleashed. Voices drifted up from the trail below the rest stop, a young couple arguing about which direction to take. I called out, my voice cracking from dehydration and exhaustion. Hey, up here! They looked up, a woman in her 20s with bright hiking gear and a bearded man checking a GPS device. Their faces immediately shifted to concern when they saw me slumped against the picnic table. Oh my God, are you okay? The woman scrambled up the slope toward me, her boyfriend close behind. Twisted my ankle pretty bad, I managed, grateful beyond words to see other human beings. I've been trying to get down for hours. Where's your hiking partner? The man asked, looking around. You shouldn't be out here alone at your age. He caught himself flushing. I mean, with an injury like that. The question hit like a physical blow. Where's your hiking partner? How do you explain that your own son left you to fend for yourself on a mountain? He Had to go ahead, I said finally, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. The couple exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. The woman, Jessica, she introduced herself, was a nurse. She examined my ankle with gentle professional hands while her boyfriend Dave rigged up a proper walking stick from their gear. It's definitely sprained. Maybe worse, Jessica said. But you can probably make it down if we help you. We've got some pain meds and an ace bandage. They flanked me on either side, taking most of my weight as we began the slow descent. These strangers, people I'd met 20 minutes ago, were showing me more care and consideration than my own son had. Your hiking partner should have stayed with you, Dave muttered as we navigated a particularly rocky section. What kind of person abandons someone with an injury? What kind of person indeed? It took us nearly 2 hours to reach the trailhead, but with their help I made it. As we approached the parking lot, my phone buzzed to life. Signal at last. Jessica was helping me into my car when the messages started flooding in. The first one made my blood run cold. Dad, got to the car safe. Hope you made it down okay. Thanks for the life lesson. My hands shook as I read it. A laughing emoji. He'd sent me a laughing emoji. The second message arrived as Jessica was saying goodbye. Seriously, though, maybe now you'll understand what it feels like when someone you depend on just isn't there for you. Maybe this will make you think twice before lecturing me about responsibility. I stared at the screen, my vision blurring with something that wasn't pain from my ankle. Jessica noticed my expression. Everything all right? I couldn't speak. Couldn't breathe. A third message popped up. BTW, Megan and I talked. We think you've been way too controlling with the money stuff. This little adventure should help you gain some perspective. See you when you're ready to apologize. Apologize. He wanted me to apologize. For being abandoned. For being left injured and alone on a mountain. For trusting my own son to have basic human decency. Sir? Dave had come back, concern written across his face. You look really pale. I managed to thank them, to assure them I was fine, to watch them drive away with their kindness and their intact faith in human nature. Then I sat alone in my car, reading those messages over and over until they burned themselves into my memory. The laughing emoji stared back at me from the screen like a tiny yellow knife to the heart. Jason thought this was funny. He thought he'd taught me some kind of lesson. He was already planning how I should grovel for his forgiveness. I started the engine with hands that no longer trembled, my mind crystal clear for the first time in hours. Jason was right about one thing. This had been a life lesson, just not the one he intended to teach. The drive home felt endless. Every bump in the road sent lightning through my ankle, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the disbelief that kept washing over me in waves. He actually left me there. The thoughts circled in my mind like a broken record. My son, the boy I'd taught to ride a bike, who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares, had looked at his injured father and walked away. It couldn't be real. There had to be some explanation, some misunderstanding. Maybe he'd gone for help. Maybe he'd panicked. People don't just abandon their parents on mountains. Not real people. Not my Jason. But then I'd look at my phone, and there it was. Thanks for the life lesson. By the time I pulled into my driveway, the sun had set completely. I sat in my car for a long moment, staring at my house. Our house, really, since Jason still had a key, still came and went as he pleased, still treated it like his personal bank branch. The porch light glowed warm and welcoming, just like it had every night of his childhood when he'd come running up those steps after school. How does a person change so completely? When did the switch flip? I limped inside, my ankle screaming with each step. The house felt different somehow. Not like home, but like a crime scene I was seeing for the first time. Every family photo on the mantle seemed to mock me. There was Jason at his graduation, arm around my shoulders, both of us beaming. There he was at his wedding, the wedding I'd paid for, looking so happy and grateful. Had it all been an act? For how long? I poured myself a drink and collapsed into my chair, pulling up my banking app with trembling fingers. The numbers told their own story. $43,000 in 2 years. But as I stared at the transactions, I started seeing patterns I'd been blind to before. The timing of his calls, always just before major bills were due, always with Megan crying in the background about stress and emergencies. The anniversary trip last month, the same week he'd borrowed $3,000 for unexpected medical bills. The new car down payment, right after he'd needed help with their property taxes. Every celebration in their life had been funded by a crisis in their finances. How stupid could I have been? My phone buzzed. Another message from Jason. Hope you're not being dramatic about today. It wasn't that bad. Character building, right? I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Character building. He thought leaving his injured father stranded was character building. The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. This wasn't the son I'd raised. This wasn't even human. Another message popped up. BW Dad, you might want to get that ankle looked at. Wouldn't want you to be limping around feeling sorry for yourself. Megan says hello. Megan says hello. Like this was all just a normal day. Like abandoning someone on a mountain was the kind of thing you mentioned casually over dinner. I could picture them now, sitting in their living room, the living room with the furniture I'd helped them buy, laughing about the old man who'd needed a reality check. My hands were shaking as I called my neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She picked up on the second ring, her voice bright and cheerful. Oh, hello, dear. How was your hike? It was educational. Did you see Jason today by any chance? Oh, yes. Such a sweet boy. He stopped by around 3 to pick up some things from your garage. Said you'd told him he could take whatever he needed for his new workshop. He seemed so excited about his projects. The world tilted sideways. What things exactly? Well, that big red toolbox for one. Heck, and didn't he take some boxes from the basement? I saw him loading up his truck. He was whistling, seemed so happy. You raised such a considerate son. The phone slipped from my numb fingers. While I was dragging myself down a mountain with a sprained ankle, terrified and alone, my son had been in my house, stealing from me, whistling while he did it. The toolbox, my father's tools that he'd carried to every job site for 30 years. The boxes from the basement, family photos, my mother's jewelry, documents I'd been meaning to organize, things that weren't worth much money but were priceless to me. He'd planned this. The hike, the abandonment, the theft, it was all coordinated. While I was stranded and helpless, he was systematically looting my home, taking whatever he wanted because he knew I couldn't stop him. I limped to the garage, then down to the basement, cataloging what was missing. The toolbox, yes, but also the box with my mother's wedding ring, the one I'd planned to give him for Megan someday, the photo albums from his childhood, irreplaceable memories I'd spent decades organizing, my grandfather's war medals, my stamp collection. He'd taken anything that looked valuable or sentimental, leaving behind only the dusty outlines where my life's treasures used to sit. I found a note tucked under a paint can, his handwriting on a torn piece of paper. Thanks for the early inheritance, Dad. Figured you'd want me to have these before you get too old to remember where you put them. Considerate payment for all those loans you keep tracking so carefully. We're even now. We're even now. 3 decades of unconditional love reduced to a business transaction. A lifetime of sacrifice, dismissed as loans he never intended to repay. My most precious possessions stolen while I lay injured and abandoned, treated like payment for services rendered. I sat on my basement steps, surrounded by the empty spaces where my memories used to live, and felt something break inside me that would never heal. This wasn't about money anymore. This wasn't even about being left on a mountain. This was about discovering that my only child was a stranger wearing my son's face. A sociopath who could plan my abandonment and robbery with the same casual efficiency he used to plan dinner reservations. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He thought I was weak. He thought I was stupid. He thought I was just some old man who would take this betrayal and quietly shuffle off to lick my wounds. Jason was about to learn that the most dangerous person in the world is someone who has absolutely nothing left to lose. And thanks to him, that's exactly what I'd become. The first call I made was to my credit card company, not for myself, for Jason. You see, 2 years ago when he was having temporary cash flow issues, I'd added him as an authorized user on my Platinum card. For emergencies only, he'd promised. Medical bills, car repairs, truly urgent situations. I need to report fraudulent activity, I told the representative, my voice steady as granite. Someone has been making unauthorized purchases on my account. It wasn't technically fraud, I had authorized him originally. but I'd never authorized designer handbags for Megan or weekend spa retreats while they cried poverty to me. The representative was very understanding when I explained that my adult son had been abusing his card privileges and needed to be removed immediately. They also agreed to flag the recent charges for review. That would freeze about $4,000 in recent purchases while they investigated. Let Jason explain to Megan why her new designer shoes were being repossessed. The second call was to Jason's mortgage company. I'd co-signed his loan, another favor that had seemed so reasonable at the time. What the mortgage company didn't know was that Jason had been telling them his income was higher than it actually was. I had the documentation to prove it because I'd been supplementing that income for years with my loans. I need to speak to someone about mortgage fraud, I said when they transferred me to their security department. I have evidence that one of your borrowers has been misrepresenting their income and ability to pay. The mortgage fraud department was very interested in my documentation. Bank statements showing my payments to Jason's account, text messages where he admitted to financial struggles, social media posts showing a lifestyle that didn't match his declared income. They scheduled an audit for the following week, but those were just the opening moves. The real strategy was more surgical. I'd learned something valuable during my 40 years in business. Information is power, and leverage is everything. So I started making inquiries about Jason's job at the marketing firm, about Megan's position at the nonprofit, about their friends, their social circles, their carefully curated image of success. Jason worked for a small family-owned company that prided itself on integrity and family values. Their website talked extensively about character and trustworthiness. I wondered how they'd feel knowing their employee had abandoned his injured father on a mountain to steal family heirlooms. I didn't call his boss directly, that would be too obvious. Instead, I reached out to my old friend Robert, who sat on the board of the industry association. We'd known each other for 20 years. Our kids had played together as children. He'd always asked about Jason, proud to see him doing well in the field. Robert, I need some advice about a delicate situation, I began over lunch at the country club. It's about Jason. I've discovered some character issues that I think you should be aware of. I showed him the photos from Jason's social media, the timeline of their vacation spending versus their financial emergencies, the cruel text messages from the mountain. I didn't embellish or dramatize. I simply laid out the facts and let Robert draw his own conclusions. Jesus Christ, Robert whispered, staring at the screenshot of the laughing emoji. He actually left you stranded? The worst part is the theft afterward, I said quietly. While I was injured and alone, he robbed my house, took family heirlooms, things that belonged to my parents, left me a note saying we were even now. Robert's face went white. His own father had died the previous year, and I knew how precious those memories were to him. The idea of a son stealing family treasures while his father was hurt and helpless struck him at a visceral level. This industry is built on trust, Dad, he said finally. Character matters. If this gets out, I'm not asking you to do anything, I said carefully. I just thought you should know what kind of person has been representing our industry, what kind of character we're putting forward. Robert nodded grimly. Within a week, I knew every major player in Jason's professional circle would know the story. Not through gossip or rumor, but through careful, concerned conversations about professional standards and industry reputation. But Megan required a different approach. Her nonprofit depended heavily on donations from wealthy benefactors who valued family loyalty and traditional values. These were people who gave millions to organizations that reflected their own moral compass. Megan's biggest donor was Eleanor Whitman, a 78-year-old widow who'd inherited a fortune from her late husband. Eleanor was also my late wife's cousin, a connection Megan had never known about. We'd lost touch after the funeral, but I still had her number. Eleanor, it's David, Margaret's husband. I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. Her voice warmed immediately. David, how wonderful to hear from you. How are you, dear? We chatted for a few minutes about family, about memories of Margaret, about how much we missed her. Then I mentioned that my daughter-in-law worked for one of Eleanor's favorite charities. Oh, Megan Thompson. Yes, I know her well. Lovely girl, very dedicated to the cause. I thought you should know, I said carefully, that I've discovered some concerning information about Megan's personal character. As someone who supports organizations based on their values, I thought you'd want to be informed. I told Eleanor about the theft, about the abandonment, about the systematic financial fraud, about how Megan had been posting pictures of luxury purchases funded by money stolen from an injured elderly man. Eleanor's voice grew colder with each detail. These are very serious allegations, David. I have documentation for all of it. Text messages, photos, bank records. I'm not making accusations lightly. There was a long silence. Then, I think the board needs to review whether Megan's personal conduct aligns with our organization's values. We can't have representatives whose character is questionable. But the masterstroke was still to come. I'd remembered something from Jason's childhood. His greatest fear had always been public humiliation. He could handle anger, even hatred, but the thought of being exposed and judged by his peers was what terrified him most. So I created a simple website, nothing flashy or vindictive, just a clean, professional layout with the domain name jasonthompsontruth.com. I filled it with documentation, photos of the text messages with timestamps, screenshots of Megan's social media posts showing their luxury lifestyle juxtaposed with their financial aid requests, bank records showing the pattern of emergency loans followed by vacation photos. The centerpiece was a timeline of that day on the mountain. My medical records from the emergency room showing the sprain, GPS data from my phone showing how long it took me to get down alone, and Jason's text messages, including that laughing emoji, timestamped to show exactly when he'd sent them. I didn't write angry rants or emotional appeals. I simply presented the facts with one question at the top of the page. What kind of person abandons their injured parent and then steals from them while they're helpless? I didn't share the link widely, just sent it to a few key people with a simple note. I thought you should know who Jason Thompson really is. Robert received a copy. Eleanor received a copy. Jason's boss received a copy from an anonymous email account. Megan's coworkers at the nonprofit received copies. Their neighbors received printed versions in their mailboxes. Within 48 hours, Jason's carefully constructed life began to crumble. His credit card was frozen pending investigation. His mortgage was under fraud review. His professional reputation was in tatters as the story spread through industry circles. Megan's job was under evaluation by her nonprofit's board. Their friends stopped responding to texts and dinner invitations as the website made its rounds through their social circle. But I wasn't done. I filed a police report for the theft of my family heirlooms, with documentation of the timeline showing that Jason had entered my house while I was stranded and unable to return. The police treated it as burglary rather than a family dispute. His note admitting to taking my possessions as payment was evidence of criminal intent. I also contacted a private investigator I'd used for business matters. If Jason thought he could hide assets or income, he was gravely mistaken. Every bank account, every investment, every valuable possession would be documented and tracked. When the inevitable divorce came, because Megan was already starting to realize she'd hitched herself to a sinking ship, I wanted to make sure Jason couldn't hide anything from the settlement. The phone calls started on day 3. First from Megan, crying and begging me to take down that horrible website and stop destroying their lives. When I calmly asked if she was denying any of the facts presented, she hung up. Then Jason called, his voice shaking with rage and panic. "Dad, what the hell are you doing? This is insane. We can work this out." "Can we?" I asked, my voice eerily calm. "The way we worked things out on the mountain? The way you worked things out while stealing from my basement? I was going to give those things back. It was just temporary." "Were you? When exactly? Before or after you spent my money on Megan's spa treatments?" "Look, I'm sorry about the mountain, okay? Yeah, I was angry. I made a mistake." "A mistake," I repeated. "You call abandoning your injured father a mistake. You call theft a mistake. What do you call sending me laughing emojis afterward?" The silence stretched between us. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder, more desperate. "Fine. You want to play hardball? 2 can play that game. I'll tell everyone you're an abusive father, that you've been controlling me with money my whole life. I'll sue you for harassment." I smiled. though he couldn't see it. By all means, Jason, take me to court. I'd love for a judge to hear about your character. I'd love for a jury to see those text messages you sent while I was injured and alone. He hung up, but I knew he'd be back, because there was one more thing he didn't know yet, the final move in a game he'd started but could never win. The reading of my new will was scheduled for next week. The will that left everything to charity with a detailed explanation of why. The will that would be read aloud to my attorney, witnessed and recorded, ensuring that Jason's greed and cruelty would be permanently documented in legal records. He wanted to learn about consequences. He was about to get a master class from a teacher who'd had 40 years to perfect the art of strategic thinking. The student was about to discover just how much he'd underestimated his professor. The first domino fell on Monday morning. I was sitting in my home office, ankle elevated and iced, when my phone rang. It was Robert. "David, I thought you should know. Jason's boss just called me. Apparently, 3 major clients pulled their accounts this morning. Word about the mountain incident has spread through the industry faster than we expected." I felt a grim satisfaction settle in my chest. What did his boss say? That they're conducting an internal review of Jason's employment. Character clause in his contract, apparently. They can't afford to have someone representing their company who... Robert paused. Who abandons injured family members. An hour later, Eleanor Whitman called. Her voice was crisp, businesslike. "David, I wanted to let you know that Megan's been placed on administrative leave pending a board review. Several of our major donors have expressed concerns about her association with our organization." "I see." "The board meets Thursday. I suspect they'll ask for her resignation. We simply cannot have someone whose personal conduct reflects so poorly on our mission of family support and community values." That afternoon, Jason called. His voice was strained, panicked. "Dad, what the hell did you do? My boss is asking questions about my character. Megan's been suspended from work. People are looking at us like we're criminals." "Are you calling to apologize?" I asked calmly. "Apologize? You're destroying our lives. This is insane." "I'm not destroying anything, Jason. I'm simply letting people know who you really are. Would you prefer I lied about what happened?" "You're taking this way too far. It was one bad day." "One bad day?" My voice hardened. "You abandoned your injured father on a mountain. You stole family heirlooms while I was helpless. You sent me laughing emojis about my pain. Which part of that was one bad day?" The silence stretched. When he spoke again, his voice was smaller. "People are calling me a sociopath, Dad. They're saying I have no conscience." "Do you?" Another silence. Then the line went dead. Tuesday brought more calls. Jason's mortgage company had flagged his loan for review after discovering the income discrepancies I'd documented. His credit card company had frozen his account pending their fraud investigation. The police had opened a formal investigation into the theft of my belongings. But it was Wednesday's call that surprised me. It wasn't Jason. It was Megan. "David, please," she sobbed into the phone. "You have to stop this. We're losing everything. Jason hasn't slept in 3 days. I lost my job. Our friends won't return our calls." "Did you know about the theft, Megan?" "What theft? What are you talking about?" I almost believed her. The confusion in her voice sounded genuine. "While I was stranded on the mountain with a sprained ankle, Jason came to my house and stole my family heirlooms. My father's tools, my mother's jewelry, irreplaceable photographs. He left me a note saying we were even." The sobbing stopped. I could hear her sharp intake of breath. He said you gave him those things. He said you wanted him to have them before you forgot where you put them." "Megan, I was lying injured on a mountain trail while he was robbing my house." I heard something crash in the background, then Megan screaming, not at me, but at Jason. "You told me he gave you those things. You said he was getting forgetful. Oh my God, Jason. What have you done?" The phone went dead. Thursday evening, Jason showed up at my door. I almost didn't recognize him. In 3 days, he'd aged years. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes red-rimmed and wild. His hands shook as he rang my doorbell repeatedly. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Dad, please. I'll give everything back. I'll apologize. I'll do whatever you want. Just make it stop." "Make what stop, Jason?" "Everything." His voice cracked. "The website, the calls, the way everyone's looking at me." Do you know what it's like to walk into a room and watch every conversation die? To see your coworkers whisper and point? Megan's parents drove 6 hours just to tell us face to face that we're dead to them. Dead to them, Dad. He was pacing now, his movements frantic and erratic. My boss called me into his office yesterday. You know what he said? He said 3 separate clients canceled $1 million contracts because they don't want to be associated with someone who abandons injured elderly parents. $1 million, Dad, gone because of one afternoon on a stupid mountain. And why do you think that is? Because of what you told them, because of that goddamn website. He spun to face me, his face flushed and desperate. You made me sound like some kind of psychopath, like I'm Ted Bundy or something. I documented exactly what you did, Jason, with timestamps and evidence. I didn't embellish or exaggerate, but you made it sound so calculated, so evil. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I was angry. I was frustrated. His voice rose to almost a shout. You've been hanging money over my head my entire adult life. Every loan, every favor, every time I needed help, there was always some lecture about responsibility and gratitude. And so you abandoned me on a mountain? I didn't abandon you. I left. I was pissed off, and I wanted you to see what it felt like to need someone and have them not be there. While I was injured and helpless. You weren't helpless. You're not some fragile old man. I knew you'd figure it out. I stared at him, this stranger wearing my son's face, and felt something cold settle in my chest. So the sprained ankle, the 3-mile hike down rocky terrain alone, that was all just character building? He faltered, some of the fire going out of him. I didn't think it was that bad. And the theft? While I was struggling down that mountain, you came to my house and stole my family treasures, my father's tools, my mother's jewelry. Was that character building too? I wasn't stealing. I was taking what should have been mine anyway. You've been holding it over me like some kind of carrot, always talking about inheritance and legacy, and so you decided to give yourself an early inheritance. I was angry. He was crying now, ugly, desperate sobs. I was so tired of being made to feel like some charity case every time I needed help, so tired of the guilt trips and the conditions and the way you looked at me like I was disappointing you. So you sent me laughing emojis while I was injured and alone. That stopped him cold. His face went white. The emojis were, I wanted you to know I wasn't going to feel guilty about it, about abandoning your injured father, about standing up for myself by leaving me stranded on a mountain. Stop saying it like that. He was screaming now, his voice echoing off my porch walls. Stop making it sound like I tried to murder you. It was a hiking trail, not Mount Everest. People hike it all the time. Injured people, 62-year-old men with sprained ankles? You made it down, didn't you? But his voice was smaller now, uncertain. Barely. Those strangers who helped me, they couldn't believe someone had left an injured person alone on the mountain. They asked what kind of person does that. I'm not a monster, he whispered. Then what are you, Jason? He collapsed against my doorframe like a marionette with cut strings, his whole body shaking. I don't know anymore, he sobbed. Megan won't even look at me. She found out about the things I took from your house, and she looked at me like I was a stranger, like she didn't know who I was. Her sister called me a sociopath. Her mother called me evil. Evil. Dad. He looked up at me with desperate eyes, tears streaming down his face. My coworkers cross the street when they see me coming. The grocery store clerk, the one who's been friendly for years, she wouldn't make eye contact yesterday. The neighbors whisper when I walk by. Mrs. Patterson from down the street saw me coming and literally went back inside her house. And how does that make you feel? Like I want to disappear. Like I want to crawl into a hole and never come out. Is that what you wanted? To make me feel like a pariah, like some kind of freak? I wanted you to understand what consequences feel like. These aren't consequences. They're persecution. You've turned everyone against me. You've made me into some kind of villain when all you did was what, Jason? He opened his mouth, then closed it. For a long moment, he just stared at me, his face cycling through emotions, anger, desperation, confusion, and finally something that might have been dawning horror. All I did was leave my injured father alone on a mountain and steal from him while he was helpless, he whispered. Yes, and send him laughing emojis about it. Yes, and tell him he deserved it. Yes. He slumped against the doorframe, all the fight going out of him. "I don't know how to fix this," he whispered. "I don't know how to make people stop looking at me like I'm a monster. How do I take back something like this? How do I convince people that I'm not the person who would do something like this?" For a moment, just a moment, I felt the old paternal instinct kick in, the urge to comfort, to forgive, to make everything better. But then I remembered the cold mountain wind, the laughing emoji, the empty spaces in my basement where my memories used to live. Maybe you should have thought about that before you became the person who would do something like this. I was angry. I was frustrated. I made a mistake. No, Jason. A mistake is taking the wrong exit on the highway. What you did was calculated cruelty, and now you're facing the consequences of that choice. He looked up at me with desperate eyes. "What do you want from me? What will it take to make this stop?" I considered the question seriously. What did I want? An apology? Restitution? For him to somehow become the son I thought I'd raised? I want you to understand," I said finally, "what it feels like when someone you love and trust betrays you completely. I want you to experience what it's like to be abandoned by the people you depend on. I want you to learn that actions have consequences, and some consequences can't be undone with charm or apologies or promises to do better." "You're destroying my entire life." "No, Jason. I'm letting you experience the life you chose when you decided to become the kind of person who abandons injured family members. This is who you are. These are the consequences of being that person." He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away without another word. Friday morning brought the final domino. Jason's company had terminated his employment effective immediately. Megan's nonprofit had accepted her resignation. Their mortgage company had begun foreclosure proceedings. The police had issued a warrant for Jason's arrest on theft charges. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source. Megan's parents, who'd been helping with their finances for years, sent a certified letter disowning their daughter and son-in-law. They'd seen the website, read the documentation, and decided they could no longer associate with people capable of such cruelty. The letter was forwarded to me by their lawyer. I was listed as a character witness in their decision. It ended with a line that made me smile grimly. "We raised our daughter to value family and compassion. We cannot continue supporting someone who has chosen to align herself with a person who abandons injured elderly parents." That evening, I sat in my living room, surrounded by the empty spaces where my stolen treasures had once lived, and felt something I hadn't expected. Peace, not satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge, not victory. There were no winners in this tragedy, but peace. The peace that comes from finally stopping an untenable situation, from refusing to enable destruction, from choosing truth over comfort. Jason had taught me something valuable on that mountain. He'd shown me that sometimes the people we love most are capable of unthinkable cruelty. But I'd taught him something too. I'd taught him that cruelty has a price, and some prices are too high for anyone to pay.